Good evening and welcome to Thai PBS World. Right now, so many countries are fighting COVID-19, and one of the countries which have been regarded as quite successful in coping with COVID-19 is New Zealand. What's the ingredient of success of New Zealand in coping with the pandemic? Thai PBS World tonight, Khun Thep Chayong and me talk to New Zealand ambassador to Thailand. So far, what's the latest situation in New Zealand regarding COVID-19?
For us, we see it more as a strategy rather than a success, an ongoing strategy. And the reason I say that is because we're very conscious about still what's happening around the rest of the world. And New Zealand, of course, is a very international country. So a lot of our prosperity, a lot of our well-being depends on us being able to operate in an international environment. So we're very conscious about that. We're also very conscious about the risks of a potential second wave to New Zealand, and so the importance to continue being cautious, continue being very careful, continue coming up with policies which reflect the issues we're dealing with. So, you know, we're very lucky. We've gone over 80 days now with without a single case of locally transmitted COVID. You know, we feel we still have some cases which are coming in, but similar to Thailand, we're trying to make sure that our border is very robust to ensure that the cases that may be coming in are detected, contained and treated at the border. So right now we have a 4-level alert system for COVID. The highest level is level 4. We were in that for about 5 weeks. We then transitioned back as the situation allowed us to 3, which meant we gradually lifted some of the restrictions. Level 4, the top level was pretty much a full close down of most of our services. Domestic travel was not allowed. And only essential travel and essential services were open. We're now on level 1. So we've been on level 1 for the last few weeks, which means essentially that all of our domestic restrictions have been lifted, but our borders remain largely closed to foreigners.
So the New York Times had a very interesting article about Thailand recently. The headline says, nobody knows what Thailand is doing right, but so far it's working. Can the same headline apply to New Zealand?
I think we had some advantages in that we did act quickly. We had a very clear whole of government coordination response structure, which allowed us to coordinate across various different agencies and implement measures very quickly. But we're a very small country. We're an island country at the bottom of the South Pacific, which gives us some natural protections and some natural barriers. But we've been watching, obviously, Thailand's response very closely as well, and it's been a very strong public health response. And we do see some parallels between what Thailand has done and what we've done. For example, a very strong public health-led response. So public health and science advice seems to have driven a lot of the decisions in Thailand in a similar way as they've driven a lot of the decisions that we took with our response. Secondly, public education and communication has been very, very important. So, you know, you've seen very strong, community buy-in to the response, people washing their hands consistently, temperatures being taken everywhere, face masks being worn broadly. In New Zealand as well, the government put a very high priority on ensuring that people understood what actions they could take to protect their communities and protect each other and ultimately protect the country. But the other thing that was really important in both the Thai and New Zealand responses so far, I think, has been contact tracing. I mean, contact tracing is very important. We found in isolating cases and managing cases and then ultimately stopping community transmission from occurring. And I watched with amazement the village health volunteers in the provinces of Thailand and the cities of Thailand, and the amazing job they've done in making sure that people coming into provinces and villages are looked after and cared for, but also tracked and traced, and so that I think they're probably a big part of the success story of Thailand as well.
Do you have the same system of volunteers in New Zealand as well?
Well, we've basically taken the approach that the entire country is part of our response. So our Prime Minister and our government has said we're a team of 5 million, which 5 million is the entire country basically. And so it's been a collective community response whereby we've stressed at all points that every individual has a role to play and a contribution to make in protecting each other and protecting our communities and trying to stop the spread. And we've been very happy that the entire country has been very committed to this effort. And I think that's a big part of our success as the team of 5 million uniting against COVID.
You said you don't think as a success, but strategy. And when taking a look closely at the decision made by Prime Minister Zealnd, does it really come from her leadership or she listened to public health officials to try to make a decision quite early?
I think she's been very clear that two things have been very important to our response. One is it's been science and health driven. So she's listened and her government has listened very carefully to what the advice from the public health officials and the scientists has been. And that's really sort of dictated what our response levels have been and the tactics we've taken. And the other thing she's made clear, and we discussed this, I think last time I was here about the Christchurch terrorist attacks, is she and the government have viewed this as very much a community whole of New Zealand effort. So we've got a whole of government response system, which means that every agency is involved and is coordinated. And obviously that's led by the government, by the cabinet ministers. But we've also had all of Parliament involved. So we've got a parliamentary subcommittee on epidemic response, which has scrutinised government decisions. And then again, you've got local government and communities playing a role as well. So I think the Prime Minister has been clear that she sees this as a very much whole of New Zealand response to COVID. And I think one which has been driven by science and public health sort of advice. And so far, you know, we're reasonably satisfied with where things stand. But again, we're very conscious that there's still a risk out there and a lot of uncertainty about COVID-19, as all of our countries are. And so we're looking at ways we can work with other countries like Thailand, which has had a very strong public health response as well.
I'm sure that as ambassador, you must have had a lot of things you wanted to do to enhance Thai-New Zealand relations,
yes.
right? But all these things must have been held up by this crisis, right? So now that things are back to normal, so what's next?
So where we're talking to the Thai government right now, and again, as I say, we feel that the Thai public health response has been very strong to COVID-19. So where we're looking at is actually where do we have to adjust things? How do we adjust our education relationship? Are there new areas we can collaborate together, for example, therapeutics or vaccine research? How do we keep our trade flowing and how do we work together as two trading nations to ensure that international trade and trade rules continue to be observed in let's face it, an international environment which is becoming much more protectionist. So we're really looking not only at the existing areas that we really wanted to build pre-COVID between New Zealand and Thailand, but we're also looking at how we might need to adjust our approach to ensure we can still achieve that outcome, but taking into account a COVID context which didn't exist at the beginning of the year.
And that's all from Thai PBS World tonight. Thank you very much for watching.